So Doom Patrol just had its second episode, which was titled Donkey Patrol. Yeah, an interesting name for an interesting episode, but there's going to be huge spoilers for the episode from this point on. So I'm going to be perfectly honest, Cyborg has never been a DC character I've cared about or even liked. I feel a lot about him as I do about Harley Quinn, a relatively boring character that as of late, DC has felt the need to shoehorn into everything. I think his addition to the Justice League was never a good idea. I think he should always have been more suited to Teen Titans, and both his appearances in Justice League and Smallville were as one of the weakest heroes in their respective shows. In Smallville's semi-Justice League, which included Green Arrow, Impulse, Aquaman, Cyborg, and Clark Kent himself, Cyborg was definitely the weakest part. And in the Justice League movie, which included Flash, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, Aquaman, and Cyborg, he was again the weakest part. That said, however, I want to say that this iteration of Cyborg so far is my favourite version. Maybe it's that live action wise he just suits this setup more, maybe it's because he's being written better. I just found myself more attached to the character, like I cared when he was on screen. And that really is what this show has been doing spectacularly the last 2 episodes, making you care about characters that look like they're supposed to be there for comic relief. These are all broken, depressing, and deep characters, and I'm so happy the show isn't shying away from their tragic backstories. Cyborg has always been a pretty messed up has always had a pretty messed up superhero origin. Generally, he was a football player who never got along with his dad, was in an accident that ended up with the death of his mother, and he was brought back to life using Apocalypse or Darkseid technology, generally a mother box. The show seems to have adapted most of that with the obvious omission of Apocalypse tech. One thing every iteration of Cyborg, whether it be live action or animated, seems to always adapt is the fact that Victor and his father are always butting heads. As weird as it sounds, it's almost one of the character's most defining features at this point. The show definitely went into brutal detail about Victor's origins, as Mr. Nobody makes him relive it in a terrifying way. Seeing Victor's mother's body lying there, as well as Victor's leg blown off, was chilling, and it amazes me how far and bloody these shows are willing to go to show what these characters have gone through. At least the blood here doesn't look like it was added from a cheap phone app like it did in Titans Season 1. Getting off of Cyborg for a second, the show also devoted quite a bit of its second episode to exploring Crazy Jane and her many personalities. I believe it was named up to their 63 or 64 somewhat different personalities. I feel like if last episode was a Robot Man character study, then this episode was a Crazy Jane character study. It was really interesting seeing some of her deeper and more disturbed personalities, but at the same time I have to mention how her constantly switching back and forth was a tiny bit jarring and hard to follow. I feel like a character like her can work in small doses, or if we stay with one personality for more than a minute. But in this episode, and last, practically every scene with her we would go through 3 or 4 different personalities in one scene. I get that this is their deal and they want to be faithful to her character, and if they want to be faithful to her they need to do this. But comic books and TV or movies are 2 very different mediums, and maybe they should tweak this a little more to make it come true better. We got more insights into the kind of people that both Rita and Larry are, as they spent most of the episode attempting to stay out of the messes that Victor, Cliff, and Jane are getting themselves into. And we saw more of their tragic backstories too, as Mr. Nobody was doing to them the exact same thing he was doing to Vic, showing them their backstories and just trying to mess with their heads. Rita and Larry started to become more like heroes, I guess. Towards the end of the episode, the 2 of them and Vic journeyed inside of the donkey to try and find Chief. This is where the episode got really weird and where it earned its episode title. Speaking of Chief, he wasn't present for much of the episode, and besides a brief conversation with Mr. Nobody in the first few minutes, which was hilarious, he was relegated mainly to the flashbacks. This is an interesting touch to add, and was a good way to integrate Cyborg into the team's dynamic without it being weird. You know, with having Chief being the glue that brings Cyborg and the team together. And the actor who played Silas, Victor's dad, who was called Phil Morris, I believe, is all over comic book stuff. The dude played Martian Manhunter in like 4 seasons of Smallville. He played Michael Morbius in the Spider-Man PS4 game, the guy who will become Morbius the Vampire at some point. And he's done a ton of voice work for about a dozen different Marvel and DC properties. The episode was also packed with a ton of Easter eggs. We have our first in-universe name drop of the Justice League, and I think it's our first in-universe name drop. They might have mentioned it once or twice in Titans, and how Victor really wanted to join them at some point. And we also had name drops of the Flash and how Victor has apparently met him, although that could have just been a name drop to impress Jane. It makes me wonder what kind of Justice League setup this universe has. There was no Cyborg from the start, so it's obviously not a New 52 interpretation of the League. I would kind of like if it was a JLA type setup from the 1997 Grant Morrison run. You know, the Wally West Flash, a Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, a Connor Hawke Green Arrow, things like that. And if we ever see the League in this continuity, I think it'd be cool, since that's the only major interpretation of the League that we haven't really seen in movie or TV at all. And besides very brief appearances by Kyle Rayner in the DCAU, we've pretty much never seen him in movies or TV at all. The news article towards the start of the episode also seemed to give quick references to Small Titans Season 1 spoiler here for the final episode of Titans, Superboy and his dog Crypto. And even a relatively obscure DC hero known as Fire, which one of the articles mentioned was a Brazilian girl with green eyes, and that would probably be Fire because there's not many DC characters, well, I don't think there's any other DC characters that are like that. The picture that Jane was painting at the end of the episode was also pretty interesting. It was cool to see that maybe in the future of this show, and in the future of Titans, Cyborg gets his very comic-like suit. The way I interpreted the picture was that Vic was surrounded by the bodies of the dead members of the Doom Patrol. He was holding the body of his dad, who was also dead. But I'm not sure, it was kind of hard to tell. Either way, it gives us a nice mystery to theorize over for the rest of the season. So episode 2 was another great, weird, and wacky entry for the Doom Patrol. It really does seem like this could be DC's ace in the hole going forward. It's doing a great job of making me invest in caring about characters I otherwise wouldn't like. So, thanks Doom Patrol. And I think this episode deserves an 8.7 out of 10. But thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you, and have a great day.